I studied for over 800 hours to get my 100th percentile GMAT score. But you probably shouldn't do that. I'm Erika with Target Test Prep, and in today's video, I'm going to tell you how long you should study for the GMAT with real data from GMAC and from Target Test Prep. And I'll also explain why my super intense GMAT study schedule is almost certainly not one you should copy. Starting with GMAC data. GMAC research shows that top scorers, defined as test takers scoring in the 89th percentile or above, so about a 645 plus, report studying for over 90 hours for the GMAT. Now, if you're going, great, I'll study for around 100 hours and that'll give me a top score, you should brush up on your critical reasoning skills because that's a faulty conclusion. For one, this data doesn't consider starting score. Bigger score jumps typically take more time. Going from 635 to 645 will likely take less time than going from 535 to 645. Additionally, this data doesn't consider differentiation within the top percentiles. While smaller score jumps are generally easier to achieve, score jumps higher in the score range are typically harder earned than score jumps lower in the score range. A 635 to 645 jump is 4 percentile points, but it's less competitive than the 1 percentile jump from 675 to 685. I dig into this more in my video on how the GMAT is scored, so check that out if you want to learn everything you need to know about GMAT scoring in 13 minutes. Finally, over 90 hours can mean a lot of things. Top scorers could be studying for 100 hours, or they could be studying for 300 hours, or they could even be studying for 800 hours like me. So this data doesn't tell us quite as much as we might hope. Let's turn to TTP data. TTP research indicates that GMAT students tend to need about 180 hours to achieve a 50 to 80 point increase, and about 240 to 360 hours to achieve a 100 to 150 point increase. TTP data also shows that the full Target Test Prep course requires approximately 250 to 350 hours to complete, so comparable to the 100 to 150 point score increase range, with TTP students reporting spending 200 hours to as many as 500 hours completing the program. That's quite a bit higher than the 100 or so hours we were looking at earlier. But if we dig into these numbers a little bit, we'll find that they actually aren't that crazy. If you're studying for 15 hours per week, a commonly recommended amount of time for committed prep, 200 to 500 hours of study equates to 13 to 33 weeks, or 3 to 7.5 months. 3 to 6 months is generally regarded as a pretty ideal study timeline, so this roughly tracks. If you're really taking your time and poring over every detail in the course, you may need to extend your timeline slightly. Or if your lifestyle isn't particularly demanding and you can manage more study sustainably, you can bump up your hours per week to around 20 to stay within the 6-month time frame. But for folks more in the middle of the range, a study schedule of 15 hours per week for 3 to 6 months is more than sufficient, and when managed correctly, it's sustainable. A common breakdown is a regularly scheduled 2-hour study block each weekday, plus 5 hours over the weekend. Now, some people like to divide these 5 hours evenly between Saturday and Sunday, but I personally like to reserve one weekend day for my study. So I get up in the morning, I treat it like a job, I take breaks as needed, and then I knock off in the afternoon and have the entire rest of the evening and the other weekend day to myself to ensure that I am rested, recovered, and rejuvenated for another week. Where the weekday study blocks fit into your schedule depends on when you have 2 hours free. So for a lot of people, this is going to be before or after work. But my number one recommendation is, just like the weekend study sessions, to book them. Put them in your calendar, ideally at a consistent time, and then treat them like an unmissable appointment. When you try to squeeze in little bits of study here and there, 15 hours per week can feel overwhelming and all-consuming and impossible. But when you plan ahead and time box your work, the rest of your life will fall into place around it. Plus, if you study consistently and intentionally, you'll likely find that you get through the material faster. You won't need to repeat work or rehash concepts the way you would with more sporadic study. And you might find yourself needing closer to 3 months than to 6 months. Importantly, when booking a test date, you don't just need to think about how long you need to study. You also need to think about when to schedule your test relative to your application deadlines and the rest of the application process. You can watch my 5-minute video on when to take the GMAT to learn when you should take the GMAT. Spoiler, it's not right before your deadlines. So if all this is true, why did I study for 800 hours? Well, because it was my job. I was working for a test prep company that asked me to become a GMAT expert in order to build out a new curriculum. So I did, for around 40 hours a week for around 4.5 months before my test date. And to be fair, it did get me a 100th percentile score. So if you are also a test prep professional, by all means, follow my example. But if you are working a job that does not pay you to become a test expert, this is likely not a realistic or necessary amount of prep. So should you study for 800 hours? Probably not. Should you study for 300 hours? If you're studying comprehensively and aiming for a top score or a large score increase, maybe so. At the end of the day, your time spent will be highly individualized to your starting point, to your desired ending point, and to the effectiveness of your study in between. If you have any suggestions for future videos, leave them in the comments below. I read them all. And if this video helped you, give it a like and subscribe for more like it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.